Hi, I'm Dr. Mindy Patterson, nutrition expert, and today we will discuss everything about GLP-1. If you haven't heard about GLP-1, you probably have been living under a rock. It has been the subject of many news stories. It has helped people with type 2 diabetes control their blood glucose as well as promote weight loss. So you may not know what GLP-1 actually does. Where is it made in the body? How is it released to the blood? And how is it able to stimulate the tissues? Today we're going to talk about that because you can actually naturally increase GLP-1 with your diet, with food. And I'll tell you about the types of food you need to eat today that will naturally increase GLP-1. GLP-1 is simply a peptide, which is a short protein made of a series of amino acids. Its full name is glucagon-like peptide 1. It is released from the intestines, the distal, so the lower part of the small intestine, as well as the large intestine, into the blood, and then it acts on the organs and tissues by binding to the GLP-1 receptor. It is also known as an incretin. An incretin is a scientific term, and GLP-1 is just one of a few incretins. It increases the ability of insulin to bind to glucose and bring it into the cell, and that's how it lowers blood glucose. Specific foods cause a release of GLP-1 in the GI or gastrointestinal tract, and today that is what we will highlight. So where is GLP-1 actually made in the body? Well, like I said on the previous slide, in the lower part of the small intestine as well as the large intestine. So this is how it works. We eat food, and really all of the macronutrients can stimulate GLP-1 release. So the macronutrients are going to be carbohydrates, fat, and protein, but today I will talk about specific carbohydrates that really have been shown in the literature time and time again to increase GLP-1 into the blood. Food is consumed, it goes to the stomach, but it's primarily digested in the small intestine, and the nutrients that are formed from the food are what bind to the cells that line the intestinal tract, and those specific cells allow for GLP-1 to be released. I'll talk about that process in a little bit more detail here. The nutrients bind to those cells. In particular, they're called L cells that are inside, they're kind of embedded in all of our other cells that line the GI tract. These cells are really important. They're called enterocytes in the small intestine and colonocytes in the large intestine, in the colon. These cells play a huge role in our overall health. They help to bind to the nutrients, allow for them to be absorbed. Other compounds are going to be released, such as GLP-1. They allow for bacteria to not be absorbed and go to the blood, so it helps with inflammation and the immune system. So there are a lot of things that these enterocytes and colonocytes do that are related to our overall health. But today we're focusing on GLP-1. So the nutrients bind to the cells in the small and large intestine. Here are our nutrients. The specific cells that release GLP-1 are called the L cells. The GLP-1 goes to the peripheral tissues, and that's where the magic happens. What does GLP-1 do? It's actually, what does it not do, right? So there's a lot of things that a downstream effect of GLP-1. Let's focus on the brain. GLP-1 and the GLP-1 receptor agonist. I'm going to talk about this next. But GLP-1 binds to the brain, the metabolism area of the brain, as well as the one that promotes satiety and regulates appetite. So it binds to those centers of the brain and decreases appetite. So you get a reduction in food intake. You have improved satiety. So you get fuller, faster, and it has a impact on metabolism. It increases metabolism by increasing energy expenditure. GLP-1 also binds to the cells of the pancreas. It helps increase insulin release, higher insulin and lower insulin resistance, for insulin to bind to its receptor and glucose to be taken up into the cell. So it improves glucose or insulin-mediated glucose uptake into the cell. It also helps with beta cell survival. So it allows for beta cells, which are responsible for insulin release in the pancreas, to live longer and divide or proliferate. So overall, you have an improved insulin response. It also, via the adipose tissue, liver, and muscle, increases insulin sensitivity. So therefore allows for that glucose to be taken up into those cells and out of the blood. Now there's other impacts of GLP-1 like gastric emptying, so it slows down GI motility, and that also has a role in being full or appetite regulation, but also on the heart and the kidney, which we won't really discuss today. But GLP-1 has many, many effects in the body. What about the agonist? Okay, GLP-1 agonists act just like GLP-1. They don't necessarily look like it. I'll show you here, but they can bind to the GLP-1 receptors on the tissues and have the same impact as GLP-1. The first peptide here, GLP-1, you can see is just a line of amino acids. Victoza is a GLP-1 agonist, and you can see that there are just two modifications. There's a fatty acid attached. You see the E, the blue E, that's a fatty acid, and then R means that it is a different amino acid. So we're swapping the K for an R. So one amino acid change and one addition of a fatty acid, and that's Victoza. Ozempic or semaglutide also has kind of the same effect. There's an attachment of a fatty acid, and then that amino acid is also changed out. But then there's also a change in the amino acid number 2. And this is important. There is another peptide, and this particular peptide called dipeptidylpeptidase 4, DPP4, cleaves both GLP-1 and Victoza after 2 amino acids. And this cleavage, so we're releasing those 2 amino acids, makes GLP-1 and Victoza inactive. DTP4 acts quite quickly. So once GLP-1 is released, DPP4 cleaves GLP-1 within about a minute or 2. What Ozempic does is, with that change in amino acid number 2, it allows for DPP4 to not be recognized. So if it's not cleaved by DPP4, it can be elevated in the blood for a longer duration and have a higher ability to bind to the GLP-1 receptors. So that's why Ozempic is somewhat more effective than Victoza. What foods should you eat to increase GLP-1? Today I'm promoting fiber. Fiber is in fruits, vegetables, legumes, beans, whole grains, cereals, all different types of food have fiber. It's important that we get enough fiber in our diet. So in addition to fiber, a lot of these foods have phytochemicals and other compounds that have also been shown to increase GLP-1 in the intestines. Why fiber? what in the world, why does it actually cause GLP-1 to be released and increased in the blood? Well, fiber is not digested by our enzymes in the small intestine. Therefore, it can go into the distal small intestine and large intestine, where it can be fermented or broken down by gut bacteria. So think of fiber as the food for gut bacteria. Fiber also has a couple of other mechanisms, like it could be viscous or form gels in your GI tract. It can also be soluble or insoluble. So soluble means it's dissolved in hot water. Insoluble, it is not. The caveat is it's really challenging to know what type of fiber has each of these functions. Fermentability, is what we really care about in regards to GLP-1 release, because when the gut bacteria ferment the fiber, and it can be soluble or insoluble. Some insoluble fibers are fermentable, some insoluble are not. Same for soluble. Some are fermentable, some are not. So the gut bacteria ferments the fiber and releases short-chain fatty acids. That's what this SCFA stands for, short-chain fatty acids. The short-chain fatty acids bind to those L cells in the intestinal wall and allows for GLP-1 to be released into the blood. So fiber, really important to increase GLP-1 naturally. Is there a specific type of fiber that you should focus on? Well, as an expert in resistant starch, many clinical trials have shown that the gut bacteria, the beneficial ones, like resistant starch. They feed off of it, they ferment it, and they produce short-chain fatty acids as a result. The primary feeders of resistant starch are bifidobacteria and ruminococcus. The products of resistant starch fermentation include those short-chain fatty acids, acetate, butyrate, and propionate. These fatty acids bind to those L cells that line the intestinal wall, and GLP-1 is released and goes to the different tissues. In addition, these short-chain fatty acids can automatically be absorbed through these intestinal cells and also have additional effects on the peripheral tissues. So this is something that GLP-1 agonists do not have. GLP-1 agonists only act on GLP-1 or as GLP-1. They don't act as butyrate or propionate producers. That's only your fermentable fibers, such as resistant starch. So that's why it's important to get these types of fibers in your diet or through a supplement, because not only does it increase GLP-1, but also increases the production of short-chain fatty acids that also have an impact on metabolism, immune function. So many, many effects. Also insulin resistance. If you want to know which foods have resistant starch, I have posted a YouTube video with all of the different types of foods and ways you can actually increase the amount of resistant starch by just simply cooking and chilling your food. It's really as easy as that. And so please watch this YouTube video. I'll post it in the comments as well. If you have any comments, questions about GLP-1, about fiber, about resistant starch, please message me and I will answer all questions. Thank you.